Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. Today we're talking about a video game that is allegedly good, Carrion from Phobia and Devolver Digital. Um,
This is going
I
to be a
want to
fun
be
discussion.
I want to be measured because I don't want to come off as mean. I firmly disliked Carrion. I didn't complete Carrion. I think Carrion is a poorly designed video game from every level. Tucker, though, put it in his top 100 games of all time. A list already that seems completely arbitrary considering a game called Grow Home is on it.
That game's fantastic.
I refuse to believe it. You also took New Leaf off the list for this game, right?
I did, yeah.
God
Well,
damn it.
here's the thing. In one of our videos, in our New Horizons video, I did say that I wanted to remove New Leaf from my list. So this would just happen to be what I played next that pushed it off. So
So
that
Tucker,
makes sense.
I think we need to just start. We need to get right into the meat and potatoes of the issue.
The meat and the meat, because there's a lot of meat in this game.
There's a lot of
In
meat.
fact,
There's a
you
lot
are
of
the meat.
cartilage and bone and giblets and things of that nature.
Mm.
There's also a lot of conceptual design behind Carrion, right? Carrion marketed as a reverse horror game, and essentially you're playing as the monster. You've broken out, and you're fucking to go back into the well of backlog banter expressions, be bopping and scatting around through this fucking containment facility trying to make your way out. Um, However, this game is also a puzzle-heavy Metroidvania. Now, Tucker, do you want me to give you a chance to speak, or do you want me to immediately say why this game doesn't work for me because it's in that one sentence?
Well, I'd like you to do a condensed version of that so I can
Okay.
instantly rebuttal it.
I think that's the wrong form of the word, but who cares? Because this whole episode, the theme of it is ideas that don't make sense. So
Mm.
that's fine. Now, I was thinking about this long and hard. When I was, formulating my thoughts for what I was going to talk about with you today, and I want to hit you with this nugget of truth. Metroidvania games are about becoming incrementally empowered to overcome obstacles. The crux of a Metroidvania game is you start with nothing. You start completely at the mercy of your environment, of the enemies. You usually have a very basic skill set that expands. You can explore more. You can fuck up enemies easier, right? It's all about starting from being very unempowered and becoming empowered by the gameplay experience. All right.
What you've
Now,
described so far sounds like Carrion.
well, here's the problem, because no one thought very far ahead when they're designing this game, and you're not thinking far enough ahead either. That also is the crux of a horror game. A great horror game like Resident Evil 2, the remake, I haven't played the original, is great because you're Leon and you're not empowered. Everything that comes at you is a threat. You need to grow and overcome your environment, right? And get stronger, get better weapons, traverse around. A reverse horror game, by contrast, is supposed to empower you. That's about being empowered. That's about being able to dominate what's around you, right? The monster is the powerful thing. That is the thing that is at the top of the food chain that everything else is subservient to. So a reverse horror game should be, in essence, an empowerment fantasy, because you should be this thing that's able to rip and tear through everything beneath you. That's what evokes the horror. The horror comes from your protagonist, someone like a Leon Kennedy, feeling vulnerable and feeling helpless against this larger force. So, Carrion starts out by taking two ideas. One that involves you being empowered, and one that involves you being unempowered, and sticks them together. So what this does is creates a situation where you're playing a Metroidvania where you're already dominant over your environment. So to make the puzzles function, they have to take away your powers so you can solve puzzles and traverse. That fucks up the power fantasy, because now you're no longer in charge of your environment. And then by contrast, the Metroidvania is fucked up because you start out being too strong. The problem with Carrion is it takes these two polar opposite design philosophies and player feels and sticks them together, and by doing so, it makes neither feel right. It's not a good Metroidvania. A, because it doesn't have a fucking map, which is inexcusable, which I'm sure we're going to get into. It's not a good Metroidvania because you start out being empowered. And it's not a good reverse horror game because the Metroidvania elements force the developers to take away your powers and make you feel weaker to impose some sort of limitation on your character. This is not good design. And from the beginning, it's a contradiction the game can never get over. And that's my big problem with the game.
Here's the thing. You make very good points. I just think that what you're talking about with the collision of two essentially opposite ideals, I think you're looking at it from the wrong angle. And I think that it there's some personal experience, some trauma in your past in your life that has set you on a course to dislike this game.
Sure.
I think the points that you made about this game being two ideas that are meshed together, I think it does both of those incredibly well. And it is in the strength of combining those two that makes it such an interesting and engaging video game. So it takes the Metroidvania aspects, and I think that it does this in a different way that empowers the reverse horror. Because I was thinking about this as I was playing a game that I believe is significantly better, but not necessarily to compare them. I was playing Ori and the Will of the Wisps. And thinking back to other Metroidvanias that I've played, Metroidvanias usually are about traversal. They're about you unlocking abilities to explore the world. The difference with Carrion is that there is no platforming challenge because you can go anywhere you want. Literally the entire screen is your fucking playground because your tentacles can whip out and grab things. So in terms of upgrading yourself, they're more focused on the combat instead of traversal, which I think is very interesting. I think works in its favor because the combat and puzzle solving elements of your upgrades of it being a Metroidvania enhance the reverse horror aspect of it. You getting the growl ability in order to either scare people or echolocate to find other things. You get the slam ability, which can slam through walls and combat enemies. You get the parasitic, I fucking forgot the word, but whatever. You can like drop your fucking tentacle into their brain and control them, which is a very cool mechanic for traversal Metroidvania, but you can also use it in terms of combat. And I think all of those upgrades piled on top of one another both make you feel stronger as a villain of the game, essentially, as you're trying to slam through people and bite their heads off and all of that. Now, when it comes to the fact that it's a Metroidvania, it has to take a new spin on it because you're playing as such a different entity as you usually would in other games. Oh, good Lord, I lost my train of thought.
Well, allow me to as the big goopy carrion monster, lunge myself right in here. And the puzzle solving is really where it starts to lose me because I think to an extent I agree with you, and I think that buried in Carrion is a really compelling first and foremost reverse horror game because when you get those new powers, it is fun to implement them, right? There's a really fun, as soon as you get the single tentacle fucking mind penetration power, you get to take control of a guy, flip switches, but also use him to kill his friend, which is an interesting inversion and helps sell the concept that really these people are not safe. And that was a moment where I really did feel as though I had a command over the other people. But the puzzle solving relies too heavily, in my opinion, on taking your monster and splitting it in half. There's a mechanic in the game where you find these pools of reddish water where you can deposit biomass or gain biomass.
Yeah.
And basically, your carrion monster is really two that get fucking fused together.
Well, I guess you might not have gotten there, but there is a third level up.
Even if there, I did not. Okay. My problem with it is when you start to split me apart, force me to come back together, A, it makes the puzzles feel a little bit formulaic and not empowering. And B, it really undercuts a lot of the importance of getting a new upgrade. Because part of that feeling in a Metroidvania and where they could have reached a nice harmony between the reverse horror elements and the Metroidvania elements is feeling like you got control over your environment. But when I'm this huge badass monster, but okay, now there's a gap in the wall, so I gotta use my fucking tentacle brain, or I have to use one of the fucking power where you can shoot out a tentacle and then flip a switch. But I can't do that because I'm too big. So I have to go make myself weaker so I can come and do that and then come back, make myself stronger again. It's this weird feeling of strange progression and pacing where I never felt myself becoming exponentially stronger because I get a new power and think to myself, okay, well, this is neat, but I can't use it in my larger form. So I'm going to have to split myself in half. And then all of a sudden I'm playing more of what I think is more of a puzzle platformer because the combat is when the game feels the best.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing anything else, it feels like it doesn't understand either its reverse horror elements or what makes a Metroidvania compelling. So I just felt that there's no sense of forward momentum, and that really turned me off of the game.
So I'm not, I think I need to sort of take command over this discussion as the one who completed the game and did all the extra side content as well.
I want to say something really quickly.
Yes.
That is a really interesting thing you just said, and something I want to bring up, and I want to diffuse right now.
Okay.
This game is on Game Pass.
Yeah.
There was an era where when you got a video game, you had it, and you had to fucking play it because that's what you got.
Mm-hmm.
We are no longer in an era where that's the truth. For $1 right now, or I guess $15 traditionally, you get Games Pass. You get access to a lot of different things, right? So if I'm playing Carrion, and Carrion I think is fundamentally poorly designed, and I've put several hours into the game, and I'm confused, A, by what the developers were thinking, and B, by what I'm doing because there's no map and the game is impossible to navigate in a way that feels compelling, I'm going to step out of the game. And I don't think that in an environment where you have all these options at your disposal, not finishing a game is a negative and makes my opinion invalid unless I'm doing something for Nintendad, I'm doing a formal review. That's when I think it matters. But I think it's really important context from a player experience, just from two guys bullshitting about this game, that I did not feel compelled to finish it. And I think that's really important and vital information in a landscape where you have the ability to jump between all this different stuff.
Okay.
But yes, you did finish it. And I didn't.
I did finish it, yeah. Well, your fucking rant just reset my brain.
Like I put my one tentacle
yeah, you did. Right through the internet, through my webcam, and straight in there. What I was going to say...
Wouldn't it be nice if you had a mental map to where you're trying to go instead of fucking mindlessly
we're not going to fucking go there yet, because I need to fucking rebuke you. What's the fucking word I'm looking for? Okay?
Rebuke. It's a great Oxford dictionary word.
It's similar to rebuttal. So I'm getting those two fucking words.
I believe that rebuke is a verb form of rebuttal.
Okay. All right. So here's the thing. It's very interesting to hear what you say, what you're saying, where you believe that the game is inherently flawed and poorly designed, because every aspect that you have been touting as an almost objective negative were strengths that I perceived when I was playing the game. When I first got to one of the pools and realized you can switch between your sizes, and it gives you access to your whole suite of abilities, and it also gives you an up and down of being powerful and being less powerful, and having the difference between the abilities, between the different sizes, and eventually getting the third size, giving you even more options. That was when I thought the game really had opened up, and that it was a very incredible decision on the developer's side. I felt that giving you the access to continuously use your suite of abilities, which are locked off in certain things, meaning that you have limited move set depending on what situation you're in. I thought that was an incredible design choice, and I think it ended up fueling the progression of the game, not only because it made the puzzles not feel like you had to be locked to, oh, I just got this ability, I'll use it. No, sometimes you have to go smaller and use something that you got at the beginning of the game, right? Like sometimes I would end up forgetting that I had the web shoot mechanic because that was the first ability you unlocked. So if that comes up in a puzzle 5 hours into the game, you have to critically think, oh, which size do I need to be at during this? And I thought that was an incredible mechanic. And here's the thing with this game. Every time I got a new ability, every time I noticed a new mechanic, I audibly said, oh shit, because I thought it was so creative and very cool and incredibly well implemented. Each upgrade I got, which there are 9 side quest options that you can get. They're like secret hidden rooms where you can get 9 different upgrades. Those give you cool new things. And then, of course, each ability you unlock through like worming yourself into a little containment cell and popping back out with a new ability. Each time I got one of those, I thought, man, this is one of the coolest Metroidvania upgrades I've ever gotten. And it made the progression of the game and the loop feels so compelling because I always wanted to see what creative ability are they going to give this incredibly unique character next. And that's why it pushed me through. I beat this game in 2 sittings, only the only difference being I ate dinner. So essentially 1 sitting. But I was just so compelled by this game, I didn't want to put it down.
I'll meet you in the middle there again. I think that yes, the powers are very cool, and I think that the developers did a really nice job kind of subverting a lot of the traditional types of Metroidvania upgrades you get. I mean, still, there's only so many puzzles you can create in a 2D space, so it's not like these are going to be brand new puzzle archetypes. But I do think that the various powers they give you do make you feel like you're this cool monster, right? So to that extent, I agree. I think the developers were clever in that regard. But for me, it goes back to this idea of what if I was playing Metroid? And what if I was Samus, right? And I'm on SR 388, and I'm bebopping and I'm scatting around, and I get a new ability, right? And I use that ability to puzzle solve a little bit, and then get further into the game, and by extension, I'm starting to have more mastery over my environment. But then I get to something, and all of a sudden, oh, this power, it's too strong. I'm too strong now. I need to make myself artificially weaker to overcome a barrier and keep moving. It's this weird thing where you're going very linearly up the power creep, and then all of a sudden you hit a checkpoint, so you have to drop back down to progress forward. And in a game like Metroid, that would still be frustrating because the idea is you're growing Samus's power over time to overcome the Metroids and overcome my environment. And that'd be kind of frustrating. But Metroid never purports to be about being this badass bounty hunter from the jump and being this thing that's already here and fucking up the Metroids, right? You have to earn that. But Carrion says, okay, we're going to make a game where we don't want you to earn that. We want you to be that. We want you to be Ridley. We want you to start out this game as Ridley and fucking up Samus. That's the dynamic we want you to have. But now, actually, we're going to take that away from you so you can overcome something as simple as a switch behind a wall. You can walk into this room and rip a mech apart, take the guy out, bite him in half, eat his halves, recover your health, fucking smash your whole body through a wall. But now there's this switch here. And to get through this switch, actually, you have to go find a pool, break yourself in half, become weaker, have less health, have less options, go up, open the switch, come back, fill yourself back up, and keep going. That, for me, is a much larger breach in the core philosophy than if I was playing solely a Metroidvania game. I'd still have an issue with it there because central to Metroidvania is this feeling of empowerment and getting stronger. But also in Carrion, there's this underpinning and belief that this game is all about being stronger than everything else. And when you're stronger than everything else, that's when I was most compelled. When you walk into a room and there's dudes here that have fucking flamethrowers, but they don't matter because you can rip them in half and eat them. And there's someone fucking cowering in the corner and you rip them in half and eat them. That's when it felt to me like the developers were firing on all cylinders because they understood the appeal of being the monster. And I feel like for a lot of the time, they didn't understand that appeal.
Well, here's the thing. And I do believe that this is obviously my personal opinion and it's how I experienced the game. I saw the reverse horror aspect, the power fantasy aspect, as essentially just a creative skin. I did not see that as the appeal of the game. I saw the unique character design and concept inherently, and not necessarily being the stronger entity in the world. That was not my draw towards it. The fact that I'm playing as a monster, in itself is a big enough draw to me, not necessarily that I was super powerful. So when I got to a size 3 and I was filling up the screen and my body was getting so long when I would go through a corridor, I would stretch off the screen because there was just so fucking much of me. But then I hit a room that I had to go back to size 1. That was very cool to me because it was not only the fact that I had to go back to a smaller health pool, I had to open myself up to learn to essentially relearning the old combat mechanics, to having less health, so being able to having to remember how to dodge around, use your environment more liberally, because you don't have to use the environment as much once you're big because you have so much health. So I think it opens your mind up to something a little bit deeper than just becoming progressively stronger. When you have to drop yourself down, you have to I'm fucking repeating myself. This is a very hard conversation to me because I have all these concepts in my head that make so much sense to me, because when I played the game, I was having such a good time. And I found all these mechanics to be so creative and interesting and kept pushing me to go forward. And when I made myself smaller, I was like, okay, this is cool, because not only am I smaller, I have to deal with having less health. And now that I know the game and the controls a little better, I can use my environment better. I know that, oh, I can use vents in this way. You can pick up vents and you can hit people with them, which I didn't know initially. But you learn those things and learn how to use your environment through the course of the game, so that when you are dropped down smaller, you know how to use the environment more efficiently in your combat. And you don't have to rely on, oh, I have these spikes, oh, I have the slam, oh, I have the shield. No, you have to deal with being smaller. And I think that's a very deliberate design choice that breaks the Metroidvania formula, because this is not trying to be other Metroidvanias. This is not trying to be a power fantasy in that way of you are a person overcoming your environment. You are the monster. You're initially tiny and you're scared. And you have fucking one tentacle and you can get killed with one bullet or a couple bullets, whatever. You can die very easily in this game if you're not fucking careful, if you don't know how to use your environment. And I think that's a very good design choice, because it means that while you're powerful and you can do a lot of stuff in a few hits, you can easily be taken out. All right, I'm gonna just go on some of my other points, because I don't want to give you fucking time on that one. I honestly do not.
Okay, because I have something very important to say to that I think will segue into what you have to say next.
I don't think you know what I have to say, but we're gonna fucking go for it.
I think we do, because I think we do have one common complaint, being the map, and we can transition out of this more conceptual stuff into the more concrete things by me saying this.
Yeah, sure.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, which I don't believe, but for the sake of argument, the reverse horror thing is more of a skin. And in concept and in execution, this is a new take on Metroidvania. I'll grant you that for the sake of moving the conversation forward. Then we run into a situation where I just don't think that this is a good Metroidvania either, because I think that it messes up with something that is key to a good Metroidvania, which is signposting and telegraphing, which I think this game is very bad at. There is no map, which is a big problem. And the combat, for as fun as it can be, never really felt like I needed to use my powers in interesting ways to get around it. It really did boil down to jumping into someone from behind, ripping them apart, getting around the shield from the heavier guys or what have you, right? So for me, the abilities really did just come down to the puzzle-solving aspect, which is fine. But I think that if the combat is just this one note and fairly fun thing that it requires you to use your environment, but doesn't really require you to lean into the Metroidvania elements of it, if Metroidvania elements really come into the traversal and the puzzle solving, then I think you really need to nail that. And I don't think they do, because I think that the game is very hard to get around. So to talk about it in a concrete sense, I found myself getting lost very often playing this game. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't understand where it was trying to send me. I didn't really understand what my overarching my goal was. I found myself in a position where, okay, I'm kind of swimming around, and the game feels great to control. That's one thing I can't deny. Playing as the monster is fun. You're fucking spindly and touching all the walls and ceilings and floors and walking around. So that's cool. But again, when we come to this, I've got fundamental issues with the way the game asks you to go through its world, even though it's fun to control. So I think you have a list of things that are more concrete. So let's talk about that more concrete stuff.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right. I have 3 things that I find to be negatives about this game. Yes. I don't have very many issues with this game, but there are a few things that I would like to comment on. One of them being bigger, which is obviously the map. And then the other 2 things just being sort of middling points that are negatives, but it doesn't too much take away from the experience. Those being that the ending is not super, it's not fantastic. You escape from the thing, you take over a scientist, and the scientist walks out of the base because the human scanner or whatever can't tell you that you're the alien. Which is, it makes sense, but it's not mind blowing. It's a negative, but it doesn't take away from the rest of the experience. I also think that the sections where it's like a flashback sort of, and you're playing as a person, I don't think that's incredibly exciting. I know that they were trying to break up the pacing of the game, so you sort of give you something different to do, but also get you used to controlling humans, so that once you got the parasite power, it made more sense. So in that regard, it makes sense, but I think they definitely could have made the controls for that feel a little better. It's a difference of comparing yourself of how powerful you are to the humans who don't have as much traversal abilities and stuff. So it makes sense from a comparative and juxtaposition standpoint, but it wasn't as engaging as the normal sections. Now, I fucking feel your seething hatred through the internet about the lack of a map. And of course that is a problem. This game would be a lot better if it had a map. Personally, when I rated this game on Backlogged, I gave it a 9 out of 10 because I very much enjoyed the experience. Hold on, I need to focus on my negatives. All right. So the map. Map is it is a detriment. The game would be better if it had a map. It would fix the signposting issues, which I don't think are quite as bad as maybe you were getting at. There are some environmental cues in terms of areas that sort of meld between two areas. So like there'll be vines growing, and you'll know, okay, that's the direction I need to go for the botanical gardens or whatever. Or there'll be glowing green signs that'll point towards the exit. So it in that regard, it's about paying attention to the environmental design instead of having to focus on a map, which I think was cool. But not having a map did mean that I was lost a few times and that I found it frustrating to go between areas. But that didn't take away from my experience because I only found that to be an issue once or twice. And although it would have been an issue that would fixed easily, I was so easily transported into the experience again once I did find the next door that I was going to or whatever, and just solving all the puzzles and bouncing from room to room, and then you would pop back out into like sort of the hub world or whatever, and that would have a little bit of confusion on it. But that was not my main focus of the experience, which is why I don't think it took away from it as much as apparently you think.
My problem with the map is, well, let me say this. Hollow Knight is another game that I'm not crazy about, but I think does a lot of things really well. And what's interesting about Hollow Knight is that there's large sections in Hollow Knight where you don't have a map. Because you have to go into the new area and find this fucking cool little beetle dude who'll draw a map for you.
Yeah.
But it's a lot harder to get lost in Hollow Knight. And the reason it's hard to get lost in Hollow Knight, in my opinion, is that Hollow Knight is a much slower and much more deliberate game. You take in your environments at a lot more slower pace and a lot more organic a fashion. There are little nods here and there in Carrion that are supposed to help lead you in a direction. But Carrion is not a game that is meant to be played at a methodical, let's stop and enjoy our environment pace.
Yeah.
Your monster moves at one speed, and that's fucking Sonic speed. You're literally touching, you touch everything and you run through the hallways like a maniac, which services the horror concept, but it does not service environmental storytelling and environmental direction as the chief way to navigate you through the experience. Because that's intrinsically not what the game is trying to be. So in absence of more overt and more gamey signposting being just a map screen, you can't have more subtle cues and clues because it's not a game that is trying, to be a more deliberate and slow-paced experience.
Yeah.
However, it is allegedly trying to be a Metroidvania, and a Metroidvania is all about interconnected exploration. So it is imperative that you're able to recognize a roadblock, recognize where it is, recognize you need new power, collect the power, and then understand where you need to go back to use that power to progress. So I found myself gaining powers and thinking to myself, okay, I remember seeing things that I can overcome with these powers, but not knowing how to get to them. Because another thing that is cool from an immersion standpoint, but does not service the gameplay at all, is you're basically opening like these breaches and these hatches, and you slither through them. But by slithering through them in a like a quasi fast travel manner, I found it to be somewhat disorienting as to how things really flow together.
That's reasonable, yeah.
And in the absence of that map, that makes it even harder to understand where I'm trying to get to, where I've been, where I can use my new powers to progress forward with. So again, I think that the map is actually a humongous issue with the game, and something that really made it hard for me to even want to try to find where to go to progress in light of all of my other issues too. This fundamental mechanic traversal, which feels good to do, especially when you get your wormy power-ups and you're like instantly transforming in the water to move. It feels so good to play, but the developers just don't give you the skill set to be able to play it in a non-frustrating way and not have to try to struggle to figure out where you're going. So for me, that actually is an enormous problem with Carrion.
Well, I respect that. Okay, well, I think you kind of run your course on all your critiques on this game. Is there anything else you have to bring up? Do you have any other major fucking criticisms?
Here's what I'd like to say, because I've been very negative. I have pointed out some positives. One thing I haven't said is I do think that the world design is pretty cool. Like the pixel art's really great. But one thing I want to do is that since I have been so negative and so critical of this game in so many regards, I want to offer somewhat of a recourse, as it were. Not just like here's what's wrong with it, but here's what I would do differently. I want to draw an example from the holiday 2012 seminal masterpiece Nintendo Land. There's a minigame in Nintendo Land somewhere along the lines of Luigi's Mansion's Boos Do Scary Things. It's got a better title than that. But it's an isometric game where one person plays as the ghost and they look on the gamepad and they can see where everyone else is. And three other players are on the TV playing as little Mario characters, the flashlights, trying to find the ghost. The ghost is invisible. If you hit the ghost with your flashlight, you can stun him. And then if you kill him by hitting with your flashlight enough, he's dead. But the advantage is always in the hands of the ghost, right? So I think what Carrion could have and should have done, as it does in one really key section, I think early on when you come across somebody in a mech, right, for the first time, but you can go around them and pop out of the floor and grab them and go back in and go around them. What Carrion should have leaned more heavily into, in my opinion, are stealth elements, because stealth in a Metroidvania is really not something we see very often. So that, I think, would have made the game feel a lot more fresh. And instead of focusing on puzzle solving and these traversal elements that inherently undercut its reverse horror aesthetic and concept, which is trumpeted really heavily, even in marketing for the game, it is the reverse horror game if you look it up places. Having these stealth elements accentuate that and have the traversal be more about that could have been a more organic way to make you feel like the monster and still be empowered, but have to play smarter. Because the problem, I think the developers smartly recognize, is that when you're so powerful, what's the challenge? Then you're not being pushed back against enough. And for the last 10% of a Metroidvania, when you are uber powerful and you're not being pushed back against, that feels rewarding because you've been fucking under the upper hand for the rest of the game. But if you start out having the upper hand, you still have to push back against the player. So I think a more natural way to do that would have been to implement stealth mechanics and make traversal more about using the environment in creative ways to that end, instead of being about puzzles. So that's how I would have personally done Carrion a little bit differently, just so it's not that I'm coming in here shitting on what the developers did and then saying, fuck you, right? I wanted to offer what I would do differently, so.
So here's the one thing, and I think this stems from the fact that you didn't necessarily play through the entire experience. The game actually does have a focus on stealth on being stealthy, because when you're smaller, you need to be able to use your environment, as I was saying. And I didn't think about this earlier, but it sort of come back to me through your impassioned Nintendo Land comparison, is that when you are forced, whether you're from size 2 or size 3 down to size 1, you are forced to be able to have to use your environment. And what I neglected to mention in those is that stealth is an important aspect of those sections, is that if you trigger anyone, everyone fucking comes for you. So you need to learn how to use the environment, pop out of just one vent, grab someone and pull them into the vent, but not long enough for someone to turn around and see that you did that, or to use your tentacle to grab a soldier, because the humans don't recognize when a soldier has been taken over, but other soldiers will. So if you take over a soldier, you can use their gun and take other people, which doesn't alert anyone else because they don't know it's a monster. They think it's just a person going crazy, which I think is very interesting. So it's that up and down between you being very powerful and being able to slam through your environment. But then when you're taken back down, you do need to focus on being stealthy and using the environment in smart ways, which I think is why the design works so well.
I think you that is true to an extent, but it's also important to recognize that as soon as Carrion begins at Form 1, you jump out of your glass and you immediately start fucking killing people, right? In a lot of instances in the game, when you're down to even that Form 1 form, you're still powerful enough to kill people. And I still never felt, because even from what I played, there are a lot of sections where you take on just in that little Form 1 phase. But it's not very difficult to run into a room, especially when a lot of the NPCs, to try to service the horror element, will start screaming and won't fight. So then you find yourself against a couple soldiers, and it's really easy to duck away, wait for them to stop flamethrowering, come behind them, grab them, and smack them against the wall, and kind of pick up your tentacle and snake it around a platform to smack someone else. Stealth is a component, but I don't think that the AI, in a lot of instances, is strong enough or B, smart enough to really force you to need to use stealth in a meaningful way. Because I still think even that in that Form 1 form, that's canonically what was trapped in there, right? That's what they had contained. And
Well,
as soon
no,
as you
you had
break up,
a one health Form 1. Because here's the thing. You do get larger. Every health bit you get, it adds another eyeball and mouth onto the
yeah.
blob. So you're a one health Form 1 when you're in the small thing, which is very inoffensive and can be killed in one hit and can only take on one person at a time.
At the same time, that was still a threat. That's my point.
Yeah.
I don't think that there, other than those, from what I keep in mind, I didn't finish it, but I didn't feel compelled to, which I think is important. Other than those mech gentlemen that you have to rip apart, I really never felt that the AI put up enough of a challenge that I needed to really lean into stealth. Stealth can be fun to set up a sequence, get it behind somebody, especially when you get like that invisibility power, you know. It sets up some interesting opportunities, but I don't think it's a central aspect of the design philosophy. And what I was proposing is really about stripping away a lot of the puzzle solving elements to make it primarily a stealth game instead of a game that would leverage, as it does now, leverage stealth in certain instances to progress. So that's really what I was proposing more of. And maybe if I played more, I would see a little bit more of that, but I'm not going to play more. I think I've kind of outlined my position.
The reason I brought that up is because the game in later segments does have, or like the last fourth of the game or whatever, there are so many enemies around that you do have to end up being more stealthy, and you are constantly brought down to lower forms where you do need to end up using your environment, where they have rooms just filled with like 4 mechs and guys with flamethrowers and guys with shields, and you do need to take them out one by one in order to sort of what's the word I'm looking for, like size the room down to just a few enemies so you can go in there and just fuck them up. Another thing, I don't know if you got to the drones. Those you definitely have to be a little more careful with, because
I like bonking those against things. That's fun.
The mechs were hard, but I actually think the drones were the toughest enemies in the game, because they can only be hit from one side, and if you touch them, you take damage, which is not something that happens with any other enemy.
And again, I think that's fair to say, but I don't want to fucking cyclicalize us by bringing us back into this. But again, I kind of think late game, taking away your skill set and making you not empowered anymore in a Metroidvania or voice horror game is not a good idea from a conceptual standpoint. So I don't even really think that cuts the mustard. But again, that's my perspective.
Okay. I think I'm gonna propose that I take on the ending segment of this, where
I'll accept your proposal.
I yin to your yang, close the video with why this game worked so well for me, while you opened the video with why it didn't work so well. Sure. And maybe that's not the ideal way we should have formatted this video, but you know what? It's going to be how it is. Okay, so as I said, the balance between reverse horror and Metroidvania aspects worked so well for me, not only because I didn't mind the puzzle solving, I actually thought it was really fun. And it's very interesting to me to have a Metroidvania that is more focused on puzzle solving when compared to platforming challenges, which is or combat challenges. Combat being like Hollow Knight, platforming being more like Ori. Or I haven't played Metroid, so I wouldn't know which one that focuses on. But because the game was so fun to control, because the movement of the character is so unique, works so well, is so finely tuned. B, the environments were so interesting to me. I'm a very big fan of Men in Black, sort of SCP style stuff like Control, where it is based around a secret government facility hiding away, an alien or something. I was very engaged by that, even though the story is pretty weak. And in this instance, I'm definitely a gameplay over story thing, because I had such a good time controlling it and enjoyed the world so much. I also think that the art style is incredible. It's some of the best pixel art I've ever seen. It has some absolutely insane fucking particle effect physics with the blood spurting everywhere and things being broken apart. And it's very impressive. And also the soundtrack was very good. It was a dynamic soundtrack that starts to pick up when you're getting combat, and it has a very eerie sort of Stranger Things, John Carpenter's The Thing sort of vibe, which I really, really enjoyed. And also just the creativity, the impact, and the implementation of the upgrades that you get throughout the game. And every time I obtained a new upgrade, I thought, as I said, man, this is one of the coolest abilities I've ever gotten in a video game. And I was just so impressed by that and how it fueled into the combat and fueled into the puzzle solving, and the mixture between puzzle solving and combat and traversal of how fun I found that to be, that the lack of a map didn't bother me. It bothered me in some areas, but I found myself having such a fun time roaming around the world and using my new abilities to traverse and to discover new areas that it wasn't such a big deal when I was lost. I felt like I would eventually find it, and I did. I beat this game in 5 hours. Getting lost was probably 20 minutes of that. So I really don't find that to be as big of a problem. And also, I found the side content to be really interesting. It's these small containment unit chambers that are sort of hidden away that you can go back to, that add you more health, they add you more energy, they give you small upgrades to different things. And it's just how tightly designed this game felt to me in terms of how you progress through your mechanics and each one feeling more powerful than the other, but having to be able to go back to the other mechanics and lower yourself to a smaller health form. I thought that was so engaging and so unique when in comparison to other Metroidvanias that it is one of my favorite games. I don't think it's a perfect game. I highly, highly recommend it. I think it is a fantastic game for someone to try and to spend just an evening or 2 days sort of going through just to have the experience of it, because there really is nothing like it. And it was such an enjoyable experience to me. And honestly, thinking about this, I mean, I liked it more than I even thought of when I got off of it, because I have so few criticisms of the game and I enjoyed the experience so much. And it's different from other Metroidvanias in that it's condensed. Metroidvanias are usually a longer experience, and the fact that they condensed it and didn't have it overstay its welcome is exactly what I'm looking for in an indie game. And this is just, it takes all those elements of creativity and condensation, which is not the fucking word I'm looking for, but whatever, and spits it out in this tightly designed package that I just had an incredible experience with.
Well, I mean, I certainly don't agree with what you just said, but I think I'm glad you liked it, because clearly there's an audience for this game. I mean, there's a lot of support for it online. I'm seeing a lot of people enjoy it. Nintendo, actually, we're going to be issuing it a very glowing verdict very soon. So it's cool that people enjoy it. All I have to say, I suppose, is just go play Metroid Fusion. I played that earlier this year, and it's a fucking phenomenal game. But I think I'm basically out of thoughts on Carrion. Honestly, I could keep going. I'm not going to, but it just didn't work for me, and that's okay. There are so many other games I can play, so that's totally fine.
Yep, it's good to have it's good to have a fundamental disagreement from time to time.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you very much for watching, guys. We will be back in another video relatively soon. We record these out of order, so who knows what the fuck is coming up next, but something will. So I hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you guys later.
See ya. See, now we got a fucking animated intro, and you're over here wanting to make it sound professional. You're like, oh, we gotta like fucking introduce the video and like know the name of the developer, and it's like we're getting too big for our fucking britches already.
You have some big britches that hold your fucking fat dumpy.
My waist is only, I have a 32 inch waist. Okay.